How do I talk about this very uncomfortable subject?
This is going to Getugly.
So one of the defining characteristics of the progressive left that's really useful to be aware of and to look out for is this thing that they do where they just make stuff up, right? They just invent stuff. So they make up new categories and they make up new words and they invent new moral standards and they take words with long established, well-known meanings and they give it new meanings that suit their purposes. So they make this stuff up and then they put it out in the world and they proclaim this thing they just made up to be true. It didn't exist 10 minutes ago, but now this is real and it's true. And then they start issuing demands to everybody that you're supposed to follow in order to conform to the standards of this thing that they just invented. This is not surprising from the progressive left, postmodernists, who are very invested in this idea of privileging subjectivity at the expense of objectivity. And one of the best examples of this thing, of making things up and proclaiming it true, is this notion of cultural appropriation, which is nonsense, right? It's just garbage. It's just meaningless nonsense, pointless. And the Globe and Mail, which is one of the major news and information media outlets here in Canada, recently put out this little piece of propaganda on their website promoting the notion that cultural appropriation is kind of an established truth. And all the cool, clever, enlightened people know this, and if you're not on board with this, well, what's wrong with you? And they literally say in this video, you've got a problem, but if you just, try to be more like us, the enlightened ones, it'll be better for you, and we won't come after you. These people are just like, nauseating. They're so smug and sanctimonious and self-righteous. There's 4 of them on the video. 3 of them are writers, I think, for the Globe and Mail, and the other one's some comedian nobody's ever heard of. The knowing group who gets to inform their lessers out there in the public about their wisdom and how they can improve themselves and come closer to their own standards. I'm not even really exaggerating. They really do come across like that in this video. They're so happy with themselves. Have a look at it. Tell me if you don't agree with it. They're really annoying. And we'll take it apart as we go along. Have a look.
Let's talk about you stealing from me. Just kidding. Not kidding. Hello, my name is Ryan McMahon. I'm an Anishinaabe writer and comedian based out of Treaty 1 territory.
How do I talk about this very uncomfortable subject?
Cultural appropriation. What is it?
All right, I'm going to get to that because there's some good definitions that people can agree on. But first, I'm going to take you through a little scenario.
Picture yourself at home and picture your neighbor. You like your neighbor, you get along fine, but you slowly start to notice that they're copying you.
The way you dress, the way you talk, the way you walk, the car you drive, whatever. All the things that make you you. It's weird.
But when does it cross the line?
When does it become wrong?
Well, your neighbor likes your car so much that they start to sneak in for drives. They start coming into your house to use your sofa and TV. They put on your clothes.
Even your favorite t-shirt. Yeah, they put it on.
That's clearly wrong, and there are laws against that. Culture isn't so easy, though.
Culture is messy.
So check that out, right? So they start out with, we're going to define what this term cultural appropriation means. And so they do this weird scenario thing where they talk about this neighbor who starts coming over to your house and sitting on your couch and wearing your clothes. And then they go, now, that's nothing like cultural appropriation. So forget about that, because cultural appropriation it's really messy. This is their own explanation for this.
Cultural appropriation is theft.
Theft.
Period. But it's so hard to see it in action. So here is a definition of cultural appropriation.
So he says that cultural appropriation is theft, right? That's straightforward, it's theft. And then two other people, they go, it's theft, it's theft. And then he defines it. And he says, this is the definition of cultural appropriation.
It's when a person picks aspects of a culture they don't belong to and they use it for themselves out of context.
Which isn't theft, right? Again, this is them explaining this. This is the people who claim to know what these terms mean. This is them trying to make this make sense to anybody. Clearly, it doesn't even make sense to them. They don't even know what they mean by these terms. They've had like 3 different versions of it, and none of them are the same, and every time they say something, and that's the definition of it.
This whole controversy around cultural appropriation just keeps coming up, and it seems like people really want a list of do's and don'ts.
First of all, it keeps coming up because people like you guys in the media keep bringing it up. People are clamoring to have instructions and guidelines to know what to do. No, they're not. Nobody is clamoring for this stuff. But again, this is what people in the progressive left and in that progressive left activist media establishment do. They invent these things. They tell you it's true, and then they start issuing instructions and demands on you.
This is cultural appropriation, this isn't.
But it just doesn't work that way.
They want permission to be able to do certain things, like wear dreadlocks in certain situations, or to wear a sari in certain situations, or to make sushi and open a sushi restaurant. But it's not cut and dry like that.
Because every situation is unique.
And then, like, these theoretical people who are clamoring for instructions about this stuff, who want to know, is it okay to do this and is it not okay to do that, they're told it doesn't work that way. Of course it doesn't work that way, right? It's like, it's theft, but you know how theft is a crime and this isn't a crime, at least not yet, and you know how, you know exactly how theft works, it's my thing and you took it from me and that's theft. It's exactly like those things, except it doesn't work that way. And how does it work then? It works whatever way the person who feels like they've been appropriated from says it works. That's essentially how it works, folks. So in other words, the person who is claiming to be appropriated from can never be wrong, and the person who is being accused of that can never be right.
When you talk about freedom of speech as a response to a conversation about cultural appropriation, really all you're doing is shutting down the hard conversation.
If you use freedom of speech as a principle to push back against this, you're shutting down the conversation. She'd actually said that.
So stop making distractions.
Stop making distractions, right? So a distraction to these people is anything that challenges their point of view. They just simply label that a distraction. Literally, what they're telling you there is that anybody who is concerned about how this impacts on free speech, your point of view, your concerns are irrelevant, right? It's only the way we think about this that matters. Wise, critical thinking adults do not simply proclaim points of view that are different to theirs irrelevant in order to justify not having to address criticisms. And that's what these people are doing in this video.
And replacing it with something reactionary and very easy and kind of dichotomous.
Stop.
Reactionary, very easy, and kind of dichotomous. This involves the issue of free speech. Oh, wait a minute, that's reactionary and kind of dichotomous. Like this is some kind of argument against, it's like, these people take themselves seriously. That's what's so troubling.
Free speech versus censorship.
Making distractions.
Why not try and settle into that tougher conversation?
Why not settle in to the free speech conversation? Oh, I know why. It's because you want to dictate the terms and the context for the entire discussion, which is exactly why the free speech aspect is the important thing to address and to settle in on.
If there are people on the margins, maybe we need to think about how to bring them toward the center, rather than taking the platform you already have and trying to imagine what it's like to be on the margins.
Okay, I have no idea who this woman is, but she is excruciating. It's like she's talking to 5-year-olds. They're all sitting around her feet, and she's like the kindergarten teacher or something. These people really think of themselves as the enlightened class. And they really honestly believe that because they're so much more aware and plugged into the truth, that it's, you know, they're trying to be benevolent to you dummies out there, you kind of knuckle draggers who just don't get this. You know, if we can talk slowly to them and, you know, we can tell them, you should bring these people into the center and stop being so privileged. And, these people are nauseating.
So does this mean that white writers can't or shouldn't write the experiences of people who are not white?
White writers can write about whatever they choose.
Hey, thanks.
But what you have to do is be prepared to be scrutinized for it.
Don't be surprised when people from diverse communities step up to you and say, hey, what was that about?
I don't think anybody cares about people from diverse communities coming up to writers and saying, hey, what was that about? What they care about is being slandered as bad people. That's what they care about.
Because if you haven't done your homework, or if you haven't given that platform you have to somebody who might be more informed and can speak from their own experience, you're going to hear about it.
Right? You're going to hear about it.
How do people avoid cultural appropriation?
If you're thinking about doing something, and you have this little kernel of an idea that you might be appropriating someone else's culture, think simply about the privilege that you have and the power and privilege that this culture you're borrowing from has and the people that belong to it. If you see an imbalance in your favor...
I want to go and reflect more on the power and privilege I have.
About the privilege that you have and the power and privilege that this culture you're borrowing from has and the people that belong to it. Maybe stop and think about what you're doing.
Was it power and privilege and power? Can we just check that one more time? I want to make sure.
About the privilege that you have and the power and privilege that this culture you're borrowing from has and the people that belong to it. And think about other ways to elevate those other people and those other ideas and voices that you say that you appreciate. That's the best way to find a solution to your problem.
Did you hear that? That's the best way to find a solution for your problem. You've got a problem. And you really need to listen to us to understand how to overcome that problem. Because otherwise, you're going to hear from us.
Culture is very messy. It's very difficult to draw lines and to know what's proper and what really isn't. But if we go back to that analogy, you being at home with your neighbor, if you opened your door to your neighbor,
You can ask to borrow my t-shirt.
that's what it's really about. Have you been given permission to use these things or not?
So I can give you a definition for cultural appropriation, and it isn't messy, and it doesn't change from situation to situation depending on what's most convenient for the person making the claim in the moment. It's unambiguous and it's applicable across the board. Cultural appropriation is a premise invented by ideologically motivated academics and used by people who desire the ego gratification of seeing their will imposed on other people whom they've never met, who they don't know, and who are doing them no harm whatsoever. And these individuals leverage their identification with certain victim classes in society in order to achieve that goal. So literally what we're doing here is we are elevating pettiness and vindictiveness and resentment to the level of a virtue. And that's not good, and it shouldn't be congratulated, it shouldn't be applauded, it shouldn't be promoted, and major media outlets like the Globe and Mail shouldn't be propagandizing this and giving the impression that this is an established norm in society and that you're more or less obliged to conform to it, otherwise there's something wrong with you. And I don't care how smug and self-satisfied and sanctimonious the people in this video are as they are presenting this nonsense. What they're selling to you is infantilizing and regressive. These pretentious propagandists are promoting concepts that are fundamentally, intellectually, and ethically corrupt. And they have to be called out, and this has to be resisted.
Centering Indigenous voices today will make this country better. It'll make this country stronger. It'll make generations coming behind us that much smarter. And if we celebrated the diversity right here in our own backyard, man, that would be a cool country to live in.
No, I don't think adopting any of the concepts that these narcissistic, self-righteous ideologues are promoting would make Canada a cool country to live in. In fact, I think it would make Canada intolerable and oppressive. And Globe and Mail, maybe you want to go back to, I don't know, reporting the news and producing content that people are actually interested in, encourage them to buy your newspapers because fewer and fewer people are, and leave the social engineering and the promotion of groupthink and progressive left propaganda to the experts and the government.